dear Bagginses and Boffins.
By the blood of our people, are your lands kept safe?
I see in your eyes the same fear that will take the heart of me.
So do all who live to see such times.
By all that you hold dear, this good earth.
There's some good in this earth, and it's worth fighting.
Okay, the Wheel of Time Season 2 has dropped, and the audience score is a 33% boost from Season 1. This is amazing, and this is the kind of positive news that I want to see when it comes to some of these shows.
Oh, from 59 to 92. Wow.
Yeah. So, let me just say, I've talked about this, I think even before The Rings of Power came out. I talked about Season 1, and I was not happy with it. I have not read the books, mind you. I know the books are different, and they are quite an intense series to get into. Some people say that it's a struggle, much like people have criticized the Lord of the Rings novels to be a bit of a chore to read. I disagree. I enjoy it, but I can see where they're coming from a little bit. Now, with Season 1, I had a ton of problems, but the fact that Season 2 was able to overcome them, come back stronger, gives me immense hope for the Rings of Power, as well as other things. House of the Dragon, and I mean, for you, I know you're enjoying the Star Wars stuff, but if there's anything that you're not liking in Star Wars, there's always this idea that you can always kind of come from behind and reignite that spark, I guess, for Star Wars. Although I think Star Wars has been pretty much a couple hits, at least from the recent shows that I've seen. I know Andor had a bit of a mix, but Ahsoka seems to be a hit. The one that I can see that needs a really big increase is if we ever do an Obi-Wan Season 2. That one for me needs to really pick it up. But that's just me. Maybe other people enjoyed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I for me it was a little too much for young people, and maybe that's where it's directed at, and maybe I'm the wrong audience. I fully admit that, but I would like to see it be a little bit more mature. I mean, I know it might be for kids, but at the same time, you are showcasing two characters that came out in the late 90s. I do feel like you should grow with the audience a little bit and then understand you're going to have people who watched the prequel trilogy as a young child who have now grown up, and maybe it's more for them than it is for little kids, but I digress. I just wanted to take this time to highlight that.
Is that what the excuse is? They're saying that the Obi-Wan show is for kids?
Well, that's what. Whenever you criticize Star Wars, that's the answer. It's for kids. So if I don't like something in Star Wars, I'm just told it's for kids. Now,
Well, I think actually that was the intent of the original, that like Star Wars trilogy was for kids. That
Yeah.
was always what they said, and they did so much merchandising. Like there's so many Star Wars toys and stuff.
well, yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so the fact that it's for kids. Oh, how do I phrase this? The fact that it is for kids, it may very well be for kids, but there's something about the original trilogy of Star Wars that, while it is for kids, still has adult content in terms of the ideas and philosophies that you are
And incest.
and fair enough.
It's a joke.
He wasn't done writing it before. This is this, not to turn this video into another Star Wars video, but it's a running theme with these Star Wars showrunners and directors. They don't seem to think out their ideas all the way when they start writing, and then they write themselves into a corner, and then they just don't care. They just, I don't care that happened. Don't think about it. It's for kids. Oh, how's Mandalorian gonna end, and how's it gonna wrap up and come into the movies and other shows? I don't know. It's for kids. We're gonna wrap it up when people stop buying Baby Yoda dolls. But yeah, I guess all I'm trying to say is I'm glad that shows are able to listen to their fans, listen to what the audience is saying and make changes. And it doesn't require massive changes. In fact, I have not seen season 2, so I'm not a complete Amazon shill. You haven't even seen The Wheel of Time at all.
I have not watched it. Yeah.
You're definitely not an Amazon shill.
Yeah.
But from what I've been told, season 2 has even more changes from the books, and fans are receptive to them because they still maintain these same overarching ideas and ideals of the characters. And they understand that some changes must be made for the sake of a visual story, much like we are all okay. I know some people weren't okay at the beginning, but we're all okay with the changes made in the original trilogy book to movie adaptation that Peter Jackson did. I've argued on this channel some of it's better than the books. Some of it has a deeper impact on modern day audience, and I would argue for audiences even back then. There's a deeper impact on how these characters are able to interact with the audience in a way that I don't think the novels were able to do justice to sometimes. And again, it's not always an exact, you know, page by page adaptation that you need to do. Wheel of Time has succeeded. So, with Rings of Power season 2, if they listen to some of the audience criticism, I think number one, dialogue has to, you have to stop trying to be like smarter than your audience with the dialogue, and just just lean into what the characters are trying to say and just go with that. They've tried to flower up the language so much that there are times where it's hard to listen to. We're gonna go back and review the Rings of Power season 1, and I'll see how if I've become more receptive to this dialogue. But let me say this: the very first time I saw Lord of the Rings was in theaters. I loved every moment of the dialogue. I never once thought, it's kind of weird. I never once thought that. I love it. I loved it instantly. I still say it to this day in certain settings, in certain situations, and it fits right in. Obviously, people who know that it's from Lord of the Rings know, and they kind of jokingly, continue to quote with me. But for the most part, I can just fit it right in, and it works. It's a fun way of saying certain things. That's my big issue with the Rings of Power that I can really think they need to do a better job on. But they already have the story, so hopefully they're just able to give more time and let certain scenes breathe a bit more. That's the other thing, is that there was a few scenes where it just kind of felt we didn't get the full moment of the scene, and then there are some scenes where we linger too long. The one I can remember is the horseback riding scene for Galadriel, where they're just riding a horse on the beach. It's a little too much. There's not like I maybe they were trying to do the same thing as that horseback riding scene with Gandalf and Pippin when
Yeah.
they're, but it didn't work the same way. Like that, you get to see this great overhead shot of New Zealand, and there's an eagerness to it. Like, we have to get here. There wasn't any of that with Galadriel, so I don't know. It just didn't quite do it for me. So I'm really hopeful though that if the Wheel of Time can do it, I'm kind of excited to see the Wheel of Time season 2 now. I wasn't even gonna watch it. I was kind of just done.
maybe I'll sit down and watch this show. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's a fun fantasy world that's being built. I just felt like season 1 tried to, everything is trying to look like the original trilogy with Lord of the Rings, and they're all failing because Peter Jackson took painstaking efforts to make that look, and it's just, unless you're gonna put that kind of time and effort into it, there's no shortcuts. And so that's what I feel like happens with Wheel of Time and Rings of Power. I'll criticize that as well, but I feel like some of the designs of the characters' outfits, they're not quite at the level that I think they should be at, especially in this day and age with all the technology we have. I'm sometimes shocked at how poor some of the fantasy costumes look. At least with Star Wars, you can just say, "Hey, it's Star Wars. It's its own galaxy. They have their own fashion." But when you're trying to base your fantasy off of medieval attire, but then you're also trying to like make it magical, there's elements to it that almost just make it look like it was made in a factory. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't made
Yeah.
in that world. It was made for the actor. So that's my I have a big issue with that. Funny enough, I found two articles back to back. This one's called "The Wheel of Time Succeeds Where the Lord of the Rings
Oh,
Failed."
yep.
That one versus Wheel of Time outdoes the Rings of Power in one crucial way.
Although, but speaking of Rotten Tomatoes ratings, because it said that season 1 of Wheel of Time had a 59.
Yeah.
Guess what Rings of Power has?
What's Rings of Power have?
An 83. That's high.
Wait, what?
Yeah, Rings of Power is a pretty good rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
How? I mean, no. Okay, let me.
The audience score is lower. The audience score is 38, but the critics are giving it an 83.
Yeah, let me rephrase how I said that. It's not. I'm not like, oh, it sucks. It shouldn't have that. It's more like I'm shocked. I thought the Wheel of Time was as good as the Rings of Power for many elements, and so I yeah, I thought that they should be similar. Like, just offhand, what does this House of the Dragon have?
I'll look that up. Dead air.
Well, I'm just flicking through these other because what I was saying was
It's 93. So it's the
Okay.
critics like that one.
Yeah,
even
the critics
more.
really like that one. Okay, but I found two back-to-back articles, both talking about how the Wheel of Time is better than Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. However, what's interesting is that both of them talk contradictory to each other when it comes to the costumes and set design. So the one article just talks about how the changes that Wheel of Time made actually help with visual storytelling, and the changes that the Rings of Power make are just to change the story. So there's no reason for the change; they just do it because they want to write a different story, which is something we could talk about. But they talk about how uh, the Rings of Power has amazing uh, costume and set design, and the other article says how that's the problem with Rings of Power, the costume and set design.
Okay.
So, to me, I think like it seems like it's not a clear cut issue for people. I think it's for sure the biggest weakness of both these shows is the costumes and the set design. Now, the Rings of Power, I thought was actually better than the Wheel of Time for costume and set design, but I still had my issues with Rings of Power. Like the Numenor armor looks silly, and I I just saw just getting ready for our rewatch of season 1 of the Rings of Power. I watched the behind the scenes for episode 1, and in it they talk about how they took great care to make the elf costumes when they were in fighting the ice troll. They wanted to make these costumes look like elves, but also look like they were worn and used. I thought those costumes kind of sucked.
Okay.
All right, how did you feel about those costumes? It's been a while, but
They don't stand out to me. I
no.
don't have an opinion. No.
And yet, if I showed you a random Halloween costume for like Aragorn or Boromir or like you would know what it is. But also, Aragorn actually looks like he's lived in his costume, like he's lived in his outfit, and Boromir too. Now Boromir is part of Sean Bean not liking helicopters, and so he actually was wearing his outfit, his costume, while he was rock climbing up to where they were shooting some of their scenes. So his was actually worn and used, but still, like there's something to the design. Now, obviously, the elves are different. I'm not going to get into like the elves have like a magical, enchanting aspect to them, but but that's because they're elves. They are able to get away with that. When everyone looks super clean, even the Harfoots, there's just something wrong with like the look. It's just okay. I could go on too much with this stuff, but
Well, some of the Harfoots looked like ridiculously dirty though. Like they would have
right,
like literally birds living in their
right,
hair and
right,
stuff like
right.
that.
Like it didn't quite make sense. Like the aesthetic there. Um, I think they could have done it. They could have gone a little more. I know they're not hobbits, but they could have gone a little bit more with the Hobbit look. The hobbits look they have a great contrast where like they are farming people. They do live in these little burrows, but at the same time, there is still some respectability to them, right? Like they still have this they still want to
Hygiene.
yeah, they still want to look nice. And the Harfots don't have to go to that length, but they can't have birds living in their hair. They can't be like wearing dirt on their face all the time. Like that they can do it sometimes, but then they should take it off because
Mhm.
they don't want to do that. Anyway, I'm getting distracted on the negatives. My hope is that if the Wheel of Time can pull this off, so can the Rings of Power. And so that's my big takeaway from this, and that's what I'm hoping happens. And so yeah, when we go back and see this, season one, we're gonna start that up in a couple weeks. We will we'll have to see if there is any growth from our side of things. I think you were a little bit less critical of it than I was.
For
So
Rings of Power?
yeah, so I think we'll see how we do this time around. Because I do wonder if you see it again, if you become more critical, and if I see it again, I become less critical. I do wonder if that's going to happen. Um, just because I'm maybe now I am I have a slightly less opinion of it going in. So when it
I
exceeds
think
that,
I suspect there'll be more willingness to accept things for what they are,
yeah.
which means
Whereas you might have criticisms of you thought, oh, I thought this was better than that. I thought this scene was better than the one I'm seeing here.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, stay tuned for us. We're going to be watching that in a couple weeks and follow along. And we're going to see how the Rings of Power season one holds up after a year out.
I regret to announce this is the end. I bid you all a very fond farewell.